Because we are not using Velcro on our project, any instruction referring back to Velcro has been crossed out. We are also only applying one pocket to our bag. Any direction that refers to multiple pockets is also crossed out. Step 6 reads, turn flap, press, top stitch flap close to finished edge. On outside, pin flaps to upper edge of lower front, matching large dots, having raw edges even as shown. Based.
So we are going to go ahead and press this into place. The reason we want to do this is so that when we do our top stitch, that it will not be puckered on the bottom. What I don't want to see is that this be space. We want to make sure that that's pushed all the way out, which is going to have us, or allow us to have a nice clean line. The other thing we want to double check while we're doing this is that our curves are an actual curve. If this becomes jagged, we need to make sure that we're pushing from the inside to allow them to come out. When we return to the machine, we are going to be doing a top stitch along the edge. We're going to go ahead and do a top stitch along the edge of this flap. Up to this point, we have been using a 2.5 stitch length. Since a top stitch is a decorative stitch, we're going to make our stitches a little bit longer. We're going to change our stitch length to 3.5. The reason we're going to do this is it's going to make it look more decorative along the edge. Because this is a top stitch and not an edge stitch, we are going to be moving a little bit further in. Because I've been using the inside toe for an edge stitch, I'm actually going to be using the edge of the foot for the top stitch. Since you still are sewing two things together, you are going to back stitch. Once you are ready, you can begin. Go ahead and back stitch. When you're coming around the corner, keep steady. This is something that is going to be seen on the outside of your bags. Steer slowly around the curve, straighten out on the bottom, allowing the machine to do most of the work for you. Coming up to the curve, slow down, steer around it, steering from the back of the material. Coming up the side, you will back stitch to finish. Or top stitch will be on the outside, along the edge, nice and smooth, and a little bit longer of a stitch to make it more decorative.
Before attaching the pocket flap to the front of the bag, create a buttonhole on the pocket flap.
We are going to be doing a buttonhole on your pocket flap. To do this, you need to change your foot to the button foot. Go ahead and pull the toes and your foot will come off. Put this into your extension table so you do not lose it. The button or automatic button foot looks like this. The bar that is going to be going onto the ankle is located in the front. We are not going to put this on until we put the button in. Here is your button that you're going to be putting onto your flap. To know where to locate this button on the flap, we must know how big this button is. So we are going to measure it, taking your measuring gauge and measuring how big this button is. Allow your gauge to come in. My button is 1 inch. Then I need to find out where the middle is on my pocket. The best way to do this is to fold your pocket flap in half and to create a crease with your fingers. When you open it up, there will be a finger crease, which is going to help you to see where the middle is. Mark that middle on your pocket flap. From here, since we know that our button is 1 inch, we will measure a 1/2 inch on both sides of this so that we know that the button is going to be centered. Move in your sliding tool to help you measure. Mark a dot at the 1/2 inch mark on both sides. So now you can see where this is the middle of our button and we have our stop and start point. We are now going to put the button inside of our button foot. To do this, you are going to lift up on the outside lever, which is going to allow this piece on the top to open up. You are then going to place your button inside the top portion and push down. This is going to secure the button in the top part of the foot. Once you do this, you are going to place the foot on the ankle. Remember that the bar that we are going to use is in the front. Go ahead and put your foot underneath and connect that bar to the ankle. The next thing that we are going to have to do is to adjust the machine to allow the machine to know we are doing a buttonhole. On the length button, we are going to change the dial to the buttonhole. That is this top rectangular marking. On the top dial, on your selector dial, we are also going to turn the selector to the buttonhole. So both of them are on the buttonhole setting. We are going to then go back to the machine. And the last step is to pull down the button lever. This is the white lever that comes all the way down and will remain in the down position when we start our buttonhole. We are now prepared to start the buttonhole. You are going to put the far mark or your beginning mark into the window of your button foot. That window is located right here. So you would like to see that dot right in this window. When you do, place the foot in the downward position. You are now ready to start your buttonhole. The machine is going to do the work for you. The needle is going to first go back and forth, and then it is going to go away from you. When the needle goes away from you, your material is going to come towards you. You don't have to do anything because the machine is going to do it for you. Once you hear the machine click, it is going to start going back and forth again and then coming forward. That means that your material is going to go away from you. The only thing that you need to do here is to stop when you get to the part that you started. Go ahead and do the buttonhole. It's going back and forth first, and now it is going away from me, which means that the material is actually coming towards me. All I have to concentrate is steering, making sure that my buttonhole is going to be nice and straight. The machine will know when to stop and turn around. It clicks, it comes back and forth, and now it is pulling my material away from me. Again, all I am doing is steering. When I see where I started come into the window, I am going to go ahead and stop. Lift up your presser foot, pull this out, and you can see now that we have a buttonhole. Once you have your buttonhole, you need to make it a usable buttonhole by opening it. You are going to take your small seam ripper, insert it into the center of the buttonhole, and poke it through both layers of the material. From here, you are going to slowly pull towards the end of your buttonhole. The important thing is that you do not rip through the edge of your buttonhole. You're going to continue to rip towards both sides. Once you rip this side open, you're going to flip it over and rip the other way. Always start from the middle and start nice and controlled. This is not for speed. We do not want to rip through the sides. So as I'm opening it, you can see that my stitches on both sides are still intact.
To finish step 6, on outside, pin flaps to upper edge of lower front, matching large dots, having raw edges even as shown. Based.
Once we have made the buttonhole on the pocket, we are going to go ahead and attach this pocket flap to the main part of our outside bag. To do this, we are going to put the raw edge of the pocket flap even with the opening of the bag. You want to make sure that this pocket flap is going on nice and straight. The other thing you want to make sure is that you are not sewing over the opening, which won't allow you to use the pocket at a later date. Once this is lined up, go ahead and insert the pins with the ball of the pin facing out so that you can pull it out once you sew. Once this is sewn all the way across, the last step to complete the pocket flap is to do a top stitch on the outside. This is going to keep the pocket flap looking nice and clean. So once we sew across here using an edge stitch, we will close this flap and stitch along the very, very top of the pocket with a top stitch. This is going to be a decorative stitch and also allow the pocket flap to stay in a downward position. We are now going to sew our pocket flap on the outside of our bag. As you can see here, I'm lined up, but my pocket is actually open, so I'm not going to sew it down. What you can also tell a little bit is that it might not be completely straight all the way across. That's because this material might be laying a little bit further down. When we start, we are going to backstitch because we are sewing two things together. I'm going to have you line up the outside of your foot with the edge of your pocket flap. This will give you a nice clean edge stitch. Seeing that we are doing an edge stitch, we are doing a 2.5 length stitch. Go ahead and start, back stitch, continue straight forward, keeping that foot, outside foot even with the edge. You want that to be a nice straight stitch. Pull out the pins as you get to them. Make sure to keep your pocket away from where you are sewing. You do not want to sew it down. And then coming to the end, go ahead and backstitch. We are going to do the next step, which is to pull this flap down and to do a top stitch. This is going to allow there to be a nice clean stitch, which is going to hold the flap down, and it's going to make a nice decorative finishing stitch. To do this, you're going to change your stitch length to 3.5. That is the decorative stitch that we would like for people to see. It's a little bit larger. Again, you are going to be lining up the edge of your presser foot with the edge of your pocket. We want to make sure that the space on the top of your bag remains the same all the way down that top. This is going to assure that your pocket is straight on your bag. Change your stitch length and begin. I am going to do 2 back stitches because we are sewing 2 things together. Nice and even all the way down. And back stitch at the end. Once we finish that top stitch, you will see a nice top finishing stitch along the top of your pocket flap. When you open it up, your pocket is still loose and able to be used. This is going to give the outside of your bag a nice finished clean look.